Oh boy, the patch notes are out. And if you have not seen anything about them yet, then get ready for a wild ride. So we had the patch notes drop earlier, and I just finished like an 11-hour stream where I just went through them basically for like 5 hours straight, and we talked about every little detail. There's a lot to unpack here. This is a massive like patch, and it's mostly a massive nerf to L1. That's really the main takeaway here. Here are the original patch notes if you want to check them out and read through them yourself. I have them linked in the description. We also have the Maxwell link here that has them a bit more curated. We have added a few key takeaways here as a little summary because this is a very long post. And we also have, for example, all these like embeds here if you are not sure about certain things, how they work right now. And Blizzard has also previewed the 32 Malignant hearts with all their stats actually before the season launch. So that is kind of cool. But this is another topic for another video because we have to go into those. In general, some of these effects are actually really powerful, so I have high hopes for some of those hearts. Obviously it depends a little bit on build, depends a bit on the class. Some of them are class specific, so you kind of have to try to make a working combination here, and you will get quite a bit of power back from those hearts. Will that be more than before? I don't know. That depends a little bit on what exactly you're playing, because some builds definitely get some heavy nerfs. Let's just go through our key takeaways here, and I'm gonna show you what it's all about. Starting with defenses. So they have like a whole list of like item F exchanges, and you can see here they rebalance a lot of things, including the damage reduction rolls and the armor rolls you can have. They reduced all of these defenses here by 20 to 25%, like damage reduction from close, distant, bleeding, etc. enemies. Interestingly, they did not nerf the like generic damage reduction mod for some reason, so that is actually like #1 choice now. They also toned down total armor percent, so it's much harder to reach the 85% damage reduction cap from armor. And they also have nerfed disobedience. So you see this here, they reduce it to maximum 60 stacks. Now this will affect certain builds more than others. Now personally, I think this is not really such a bad change on its own, because this was by far the most effective defensive power for basically every build in the game. And it was also varying massively in its contribution to your survivability. And so like this, it's a bit more streamlined, which I think is really good to have for defenses. But the bottom line is everyone is going to be a ton more squishy in this patch. So if you have logged in so far already to check it out, you're going to notice that. And it's not only those defensive nerfs here and the disobedience nerfs up there, but you also won't have the 250 armor from the skulls in your jewelry next time, so you lose 750 armor on top of that baseline. The idea seems to be that high-end content in particular becomes a lot harder, and that you generally build your characters more tanky, so they wanted to probably include more defenses. They wanted to just like not become like such a like tank basically at some point down the line when you have really good endgame gear, and generally content should stay a bit more like threatening. Now that being said, it seems like it's still possible to push a tier 100 9 dungeon even as a melee rogue. So as you can see this here, this is post patch, and you see here those 60 disobedience stacks for example. But yeah, compared to what I have experienced and what I have seen before this patch, you can see that this guy is getting wrecked pretty hard. So it's definitely much more tough now, and yeah, especially melee builds in the high 9 dungeons like post 80, 90 or so are gonna really struggle hard. And basically classes that were not able to stack like an insane amount of defenses before, sorcerers, are gonna have a really hard time surviving anything basically. So I believe that out of all of those changes and nerfs and everything that we can see in those patch notes, this is definitely by far the most impactful. The defensive nerfs, the disobedience nerfs, and the loss of the skulls. Even though we get the hearts in the season and so on, you will be more squishy because of how important armor is, and just how much damage you take, especially towards the higher end. So the game will just be more difficult basically than before, and you're gonna notice this loss of defenses, especially in the season with the loss of the armor gems as well. If you are theory crafting your own builds right now, make sure you add more defenses. So this is... Now let's talk about offensive stats. They have also massively nerfed vulnerable damage and crit damage. Now both of these are kind of good moves in my opinion. They do lower the overall damage output of us, so again the game becomes more difficult, but most of those hearts that we can get here from the season theme are generally quite powerful offensively. So at least in seasonal content, I think this is not going to be such a big problem. And it does help with evening out builds, with evening out especially like choices you have on your gear, like if you want to roll vulnerable damage or crit or something else. It also helps with stuff like you can actually run a bow now on the rogue and you don't always have to go crossbow. So I think in general this helps to bring all the different choices closer together. And you can see the details here. And also, for example, the crossbows have been nerfed 65% on the vulnerable damage. Yeah, that is correct. So a crossbow in the game right now gives you 21% vulnerable damage instead of 60, I believe it was. And they also nerfed the inherent affixes on swords here, so that, yeah, for example, swords and daggers are closer together, or swords and axes on the barb, for example. So there are also some more choices now. So while these changes are generally nerfs, I think they were like absolutely necessary and they're at least going in the right direction. I think vulnerable damage is still not really where it should be just yet, but crits are definitely getting there, and maybe down the line we're gonna see some other like rework to vulnerable or something like that. Let's see. So as I mentioned, most of this will be offset by the hearts. I don't think this will be such a problem, but there are some other changes that they made to those items and stats that are a bit more impactful. For example, cooldown reduction. You see here, cooldown reduction on offense was reduced by 35%. Cooldown reduction as a roll was reduced by 30%. So this will be felt especially by, I guess, barbs with all the shouts. So barb in general is gonna struggle a bit more with that. And then you have sorcerers. So that class was relying on spamming cooldowns like no other basically. And well, there are some sorcerer nerfs that are pretty heavy. And you have this as kind of like an indirect, like affecting sorcerers more than other classes kind of nerf. So it's going to be a real rough time. There are some other tweaks on items. For example, they nerfed main stat a little bit on weapons. Not really that crazy. They also buffed basically all of the user stats that you never ever want on your gear by a little bit. So you see here like all this like elemental damage and damage under certain conditions and kind of stuff that rolled on like amulets and chest pieces and stuff like that has been buffed a little bit. Well, the bottom line here is that you still don't really want those stats because you want defenses on those pieces. And especially now that defenses are lower than before, you want to stack them even more than before. So yeah, these stats are still kind of weak and you just avoid them as much as possible. But at least when you can't avoid them, they do a little bit more. They've also added some more stats that can roll on your gear now that did not roll before. So for example, there's controlled impaired duration reduction that can be on pants. There's also barrier generation that now appears for all classes for whatever reason, even for classes that don't have barriers. I guess you can get some from like legendary aspects and temerity if you want to use that, which is usually a bad item. And then there's lucky hit chance while you have a barrier that can roll for all classes. I mean, honestly, this is a nerf in my opinion. Like, it just makes getting good loot harder. And rejoice, you can roll resistance to all elements on shields. And it did that before actually fixing resistances. So I guess there's technically a nerf to shields as well. One change that I find quite good though is that they nerfed the generic damage to crowd controlled enemies by 30% and kind of left most of the others untouched and even buffed the frozen one by 20%. Maybe that was a bit out of line. But I think they generally had like really similar values, but damage to crowd controlled enemies was just like generic, so it worked for anything. And those like effect specific bonuses just were always inferior basically. Now the third big topic here is experience bonuses. You basically cannot boost anyone anymore at all. So I'm gonna show this here. There is like some rebalancing of how much experience you get for fighting higher level monsters. So previously, the common strategy was to farm nightmare dungeons where monsters are exactly 3 levels higher than you or more, and then you get this 25% bonus XP. And this was the cap. Now there was some slight scaling involved after that, but that was relatively minor compared to those first 3 levels, so usually that was the target. And now they made it so that you get only 1.5% extra XP per level up to 10 levels. So you get 1.5%, 3%, etc. So if you farm the same plus 3 levels as before, it would be plus 4.5% XP and not 25%. And now you get the maximum bonus at plus 10 levels, where you get 15. Now, do you actually want to farm plus 10 levels for 50% bonus XP? I don't think so. I cannot really imagine like anything but like some super busted, like broken build that can actually farm plus 10 levels at exactly or almost exactly the same pace as plus 0. Now you definitely want to make sure you don't have monsters below your level, so you want to have basically plus minus 0. So in the terms of Nightmare Dungeons, this means you want to farm Nightmare Dungeons that are your character level minus 54 instead of minus 51 previously. And then this will lead to monsters having exactly your level, and this is kind of like the preferred leveling strategy now. And here's yet another change to experience, where previously you could get a lot of extra experience for being massively underleveled compared to the monsters. So basically here there was like a cap of being 3 levels underleveled, and then if you fight very high level monsters you don't get more XP. And then in World Tier 3 it was plus 10, and in World Tier 4 it was plus 100. And with every plus 1 level of a monster, it slowly raises the base experience granted, which then gets multiplied by the bonuses, for example, by this or by the difficulty and so on. But now this has been massively reduced, and you can see here that you still have the plus 3 in World Tier 2, then you have plus 6 in World Tier 3 and plus 10 in World Tier 4. And this means that if you're getting boosted with your level 10 character in like a level 80 area or something like that, then instead of getting plus 70 levels offset, you get only plus 10. And this will effectively kill boosting other players entirely. So there's like no way that this is really going to be worth it for anyone anymore. Boosting is dead, guys. There's like, I don't know, minus 80, minus 90% experience you gain now or something like that. And on top of this, what is actually not mentioned in those patch notes apparently, you can only enter the first capstone dungeon when you're at least level 40, and you can only enter the second capstone dungeon when you're at least level 60. I know a lot of speedrunners actually try to complete a capstone dungeon around like level 35 or something like that, so those runs are straight up just invalid, and you have to go in at level 40. Now, I think this won't really be a problem for most people, like just regularly playing and you know, progressing through the game, but in terms of boosting, getting to higher difficulties and stuff like that, that just won't happen. Now let's get into some of the class updates, starting with the Barbarian. Barbarian has received a bunch of small buffs. Basically all classes have received a bunch of small buffs for underused things, so that is generally quite nice. I gotta say that they're trying to like even out the choices between maybe different upgrades on skills, or just, you know, trying to bring some of the underused stuff more into the light. So that's kind of cool. For example, Rupture here got a bunch of buffs, and you know, Upheaval, yeah, okay. Double Swing is a bit better now. Double Swing was already quite good. But of course, the big thing here on the bar is the Hammer of the Ancients. So basically what happened is they, well, bug fixed it. So the Quake doesn't do more damage than it should. And I think this leads to something like a nerf of basically roughly 50% damage or so, at least for PC players with mouse and keyboard. On console, I think you couldn't use the mechanic, so that should be relatively unchanged. But again, you still have the cooldown nerfs, so those affect the Barb as well, especially those shout heavy builds. And they also fixed the buggy like rend interactions where we were doing like 20-digit damage or something like that. So that is also gone, that's good. The Gore's Devastating Grasp also was changed to now explode every 2 seconds or after it ends. I have heard mixed like impressions about this. Apparently this is a buff, but apparently also not really, so I'm not really sure what's going on there. But maybe Whirlwind is actually something. And well, it turns out the Kratos Barb actually got some buffs here, like small stuff. But for example, they buffed Death Blow to do 150% extra damage to bosses now. That was really good for that build. They buffed some of the aspects that I was using, for example the Iron Warrior here, a bit more damage reduction. And also the Weapon Master aspect that was included in the build. So that was actually kind of cool. I think that if you want to play a Barb, then this Kratos Barb that I have been making lately and that I leveled on hardcore before this patch is actually going to be a really good leveling build now. There's also this neat little change here where the crit damage glyphs now apply to all skills and not just core skills. This is actually for all classes. And with the crit damage nerfs on items, this glyph actually becomes more valuable than before. And again, this also benefits something like Walking Arsenal, weapon swap type of build more than before. So in general, this whole like walking arsenal stuff is going to be quite nice, I guess, on the barb. They did a few more like smaller changes here on the barb, but nothing really crazy, I would say. The last thing worth mentioning would be the hamstring nerf, I guess. So hamstring used to just slow enemies when you bleed them, which was very easy to do on the barb. And now it only slows healthy enemies. So you lose that status after enemies drop below 80% HP. So this will make some passes a bit less worthwhile, like No Mercy, for example, that gave you crit chance against slowed enemies. And it's not so easy to proc like damage against crowd controlled enemies now. So yeah, a few minor things there. But yeah, my opinion is that barbs are going to be kind of alright. It's kind of like middle of the pack or so. Next up, we have the Druid changes. So again, lots of like small stuff here. So they buffed Claw a little bit, nerfed Stone Strike a little bit, buffed Boulder a little bit, etc. Cataclysm got some relatively big buff, but I think it's still not really that great anyway. And then here comes the big nerf. So Grizzly Rage is now 6 seconds unstoppable instead of, well, basically near permanent. So this won't matter too much for bear druids, I think, but especially for all those wolf and dire wolf builds, so Lightning Storm, Tornado, and especially Shred being a melee build, I think this will be felt pretty heavily, because you don't have any source of unstoppable now while you're in dire werewolf. You don't have any other skill you can put there to break a CC. So something like this will be extremely scary to play in hardcore. And yeah, you really have to figure something out. There's always the eluding aspect, I guess. There's always Topazers you can put in there. So there are some options available. There's also, for example, Spirit Boon that gives you crowd control duration reduction. There's a passive that does that as well. So you could play around with that a little bit, and it may be just fine. But you have to be aware that, yeah, unstoppable is limited. Aside from this, there is a major nerf to the masochistic Spirit Boon that gives you healing on crit. So previously this was a guaranteed proc, and now it's a 75% lucky hit. Now you may think, yeah, 75% doesn't sound so bad, but the key word here is lucky hit. And this means that this chance of 75% starts scaling with your skills chance. And if you have, let's say, 8% lucky hit chance or something from Tornado, well, you have an 8% times 75% chance. It's like something like 6% or so total chance of proccing this instead of 100% now on a crit. So yeah, this means that the healing was massively reduced for any build that uses this Spirit Boon here. The same has happened to Rogue, by the way, with Siphoning Strikes. So this will definitely be noticeable. Aside from this, there's another kind of important nerf here, which is the symbiotic aspect. So symbiotic only gives you up to 5 seconds cooldown reduction instead of 8 seconds. So basically for any build that was trying to capitalize on this Nature's Fury cooldown reset combo here with symbiotic, you're gonna feel that as well, and it will potentially even break some builds. Including, for example, the Bulwark build that people have been playing. So that was obviously just based on a bug, and it seems like the bug is actually not fixed. They just nerfed symbiotic for some reason, so it's weaker than before because it's more clunky and slower, but it's still there. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if we see like another like little patch or hot fixes or something like that very soon that maybe addresses that. But for now, Bulwark is still around. And yeah, some other like small tweaks here. Shepherds was buffed, etc. Overall, I had Druid ranked as the #1 class in the game already, and honestly, I don't think anything changes about that. I think Druid is still overall best. Because, yeah, this Grizzly Rage nerf, yeah, is noticeable. But aside from this, most of the good stuff wasn't really changed much besides a bit of healing. And you can still play most of the same builds, maybe with some adjustments. Next, we have the Necromancer. So Necromancer has received also a bunch of these like smaller buffs or so. Especially they're trying to push like Bloodlands a little bit, it seems. So that might be a thing. Kind of excited to try a Bloodlands Necro myself at some point this season, I gotta say. I'm kind of excited to try a Bloodlands Necro myself at some point this season, or maybe even a Sever. They buffed Sever a little bit to make enemies vulnerable every 3 hits now, for example. Bunch of like small things here with Bone Prison, Iron Maiden, etc. One change though that is really good, I think, for mouse and keyboard users. You have plus 50% range now on the corpse skills. So previously you had to aim pretty precisely on each corpse. So that has been alleviated a little bit. I think this is a great change. and like really adds to the quality of life of playing a Necromancer. They also buffed a few minions here, nothing really crazy to be honest, but you have to see that minions are comparatively a bit better than before now, because a lot of stuff either didn't apply to minions or only at a reduced rate of 30%. Like a lot of the stats that other builds lost will be less of a loss for minions, basically. So this means that comparatively minions move up. Personally, I'm not really too much into the details of like what that would entail, but it's something to keep in mind. I think minions are at least going to be noticeably better than before, because everything else is so much weaker. Some important nerfs here to the Necromancer, I guess that comes with no surprise. Grasping Veins, there's less crit damage on that thing now. Splintering aspect for Bone Spear, this gives you like less damage now on those splinters. I guess that was obvious. I mean, Bone Spear is like really overtuned, and it's still really powerful, even with those nerfs. There was also like a stealth change to one of the passives, Ossified, that gives you crit chance. So that was not in the patch notes, but it's extra crit per 30 essence instead of per 10 essence now. So a pretty major nerf to that passive. Then we have the Rogue. Rogue actually got out of this really well, I gotta say. So after Druid, I would say Rogue is probably the number 2 class now overall. They did buff basically the weakest build on Rogue indirectly the most, which is Penetrating Shot. I'm gonna go into that in a second, but it's a new bow for Penetrating Shot. And a few other tweaks like the Siphoning Strike change, like similar to the Masochistic Spirit Boon on Druid. This has become a lucky hit effect now. So instead of being guaranteed healing on a crit, you now have the 75% chance lucky hit that multiplies with the lucky hit chance of your skill that you use, which is generally quite low on most rogue attacks. So significantly less healing here. This is like probably at least minus 80, minus 90% healing or so, depending on the build. But again, because it's a lucky hit effect, it benefits Penetrating Shot the most, actually, because Penetrating Shot has by far the best lucky hit values. Same thing with Victimize here. They buffed Victimize a little bit. Might be worth using actually now in some Penetrating Shot builds, so that's going to be quite interesting to see. Some other small buffs here with Smoke Grenade being a bit better now, Concealment being a bit better now, Dark Shroud being a bit better now. I'm kind of surprised, honestly, about some of those buffs. I felt like none of this actually kind of needed a buff, but okay, I guess. They buffed Kaltos a bit. I tried it out. The 15% faster cast speed actually is quite noticeable. It does make the skill feel a lot more fluid, and especially if you have some extra attack speed, for example, from Accelerating Aspect or gloves, etc. The Kaltos are actually pretty fast now, so that helps. Here's also an interesting buff to Preparation, so that's 5 seconds cooldown reduction instead of 4 seconds now. So this will help with especially something like Rain of Arrow builds. I'm actually quite excited to try a Rain of Arrow rogue at some point this season. I was already talking about this. I wanted to do that anyway, and now it's going to be even better, so really cool, I think. And then there are a bunch of minor tweaks here to some legendary powers, nothing really crazy. The one thing that stands out is Shadow Slicer, and that may potentially open up some kind of like actual like dash damage build, or maybe something where you have like dash for some AoE damage and then you have some strong single target included for like a rapid fire, for example, or something like that. So this is also something I want to try. If you put this on a two-handed weapon, you get a 200% extra damage dash. That could be something. All in all, rogues are going to be very powerful. The main issue is just that you need to somehow include some healing now, because Siphoning Strikes is not really reliable anymore. So there is, for example, this aspect here for momentum that gives you lots of healing for like the melee builds, so that's an option. There's also kind of similar powers for like Victimize, for example, where you can get healing from those explosions. So there are some options. There's also just like straight up potions. There's life on kill, potentially life regeneration, so you can include some more healing. And lastly, we have the Sorc, and I gotta say, oof. So Sorc got a bunch of these small buffs again, as you can see. So charge bolts, etc. Actually, before this patch, I was already quite excited to play some charge bolts, I gotta say. So I definitely want to make one in this season. They also buffed Fireball a bit, more on that in a second. And a bunch of like small tweaks to like the passives, so like the buffed Mana Shield, Protection, and Align the Elements. All this kind of stuff that gives you like a little bit of defenses, a little bit of like extra power in some cases. For example, Elemental Dominance now also buffs your Mastery skills, which is kind of neat. So you can get more damage output there, for example. especially useful because this is a passive that's quite far up in the skill tree. And if you play a mastery based build, then you usually don't have a core skill. So it's actually kind of hard to unlock the later stages of the skill tree. And this helps with that. And well, now comes the big nerf here. Devouring Blaze. Oh boy. So Devouring Blaze was like the #1 passive by far on the Sorc. It also made burning basically mandatory in every single Sorc build. And the reason for that was you got 30% extra multiplicative crit damage, which with 6 ranks is actually 60% when you have it on the amulet. And then you had this 75% extra when targets were immobilized and burning. And this is actually 150% with 6 ranks. So that was a massive damage multiplier, and that has been severely nerfed. As you can see now, the old non-immobilized version is like the new immobilized version now with 30% bonus, and then it's 21% at rank 3 with just burning. So this is how that works. I gotta say, this is a really good change because it was really hard to make this work in every single Sorc build. You were kind of forced to shoehorn in like some source of burn and some source of immobilize into every single Sorc build, no matter what, basically, because of this effect. So that is really good, but on the other hand, it will leave the class in shambles right now. So there's simply like not enough compensation for this kind of nerf. This is like a colossal nerf for Sorcs. And not only that, but there's also the aspect of control that was bug fixed, where it now does not stack anymore. So basically what happened is that previously you would get 35% damage or 70% on a 2-handed weapon 3 times if the boss was staggered, which applies all crowd controls at once, or if you just applied these multiple crowd control sources. So if you had a stun, a freeze, and immobilize, you would get like double the damage or triple the damage basically, or something like that, because you kept multiplying your damage by this value. And this is not the case anymore. This bug fix here reads that it only was fixed for staggered bosses, but it was actually tested and it just doesn't stack at all anymore. So you get 35%, you don't get 35% and then 35% and 35%. No, this is it. So basically for builds that were relying on this, that were relying on these crowd controls, you're gonna have a hard time now. Again, I gotta say that in terms of like gameplay, this is a good change because now you actually have like a bit more consistent damage output before staggering a boss, or just at bosses in general if you don't stagger them, versus previously you kind of had to like combine all these things together and you had to make this work together so that you get the most value out of it. But yeah, with those 2 nerfs, the Sorcerers is just gonna be really a dead class, I think. So we'll see what people come up with. There is definitely a bit of potential for Firewall. There are some relatively powerful hearts as well that I put some money on. But in general, I think Sorcs are going to be noticeably the weakest class in this upcoming patch. One thing that makes me really excited though is Frozen Orb, because there is a heart for it that seems insanely powerful for this. So I can't wait to try that in case it works like I think it does. So Charge Bolts. I don't even think it's going to be necessarily good, but I think it's just something I really want to try and have fun with. And the same for Frozen Orb, so we'll see. Frozen Orb could potentially be some kind of like hidden, like super OP build. But maybe I'm a bit too optimistic here, we'll see. Aside from this, there were like some tweaks to some of the aspects. Most importantly, aspect of efficiency now affects mastery skills, so that's going to be kind of nice. Then they buffed a bunch of the meteor stuff here. A bunch of like these other like flat value powers were buffed a little bit. Nothing really that crazy in my opinion. So yeah. Lastly, a few more of the general changes here. So I mentioned the aspect of disobedience. So this just nerfs everyone's defenses here quite a bit. Aspect of retribution as well. That went from 40% to 20%. So honestly, this is kind of dead now. I'm not really sure why this was nerfed so much. I felt like, okay, it was relatively good, but nothing really too crazy. Maybe 30% would have been okay, but whatever. And you have Exploiter's nerf, that doesn't really do much. And Starlight though, that is actually a relatively powerful effect now with 40 resources for healing 25% of your life. This only works with actual healing, not with overheal. But this could be something worth including in some builds. Now, after this, let's talk about some of the new items here very quick. They introduced 6 uniques. Well, basically 5, because one of them is an Uber unique. and 7 new legendary aspects, 2 of which are generic and then 1 for each class. So let's start with this one, Barbarian. So this gives you a random shrine effect for 20 seconds on killing an elite enemy, can only occur every 30 seconds. I gotta say, it is a really cool effect, and if this even scales with like shrine effect duration or so, it could be very fun. It depends on like what kind of stats it has or so, but it's definitely a really cool item in my opinion. Unfortunately, no one of us will ever get to use it. Then we have barbs that get Azarath, so you may start recognizing these names here. They're all from Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. This is a sword that gives you a lucky hit, chance to freeze, so it's basically Frostburn as a weapon. Not sure if this is really like relevant or so, but it may be nice for like some extra like flavor or some extra crowd controls, etc. So could be nice if you don't really have anything to put there, honestly. Then we have the Druid. Flesh Render is a mace that gives your debilitating raw and blood howl and AoE like damage effect. So you can basically play like a Shroud Druid a little bit. And then, yeah, I'm not sure if this is going to be good. It sounds kind of scuffed to me, but maybe it's good enough to actually work. We'll see. Then we have the Necromancer with the Lidless Wall, which is a shield. So I actually really like that. I really like that I made a shield. And this actually seems really strong too. So it gives you the chance that while you have a Bone Storm, you can spawn extra Bone Storms outside of those Bone Storms, and then if you sacrifice your minions, you have a higher chance to spawn them, and you can have more of these Bone Storms up. So basically the idea is you fill up the entire screen with Bone Storms. It sounds pretty badass to me, for the right build at least. You know, if you combine this with Ultimate Shadow and Shadow Blight or whatever, you can like throw these Bone Storms everywhere, and you can even reset Bone Storm relatively quickly with some of those passives. That could definitely be really fun to play with. Then you have the Rogue, which probably gets the best unique here. So you get Eagle Horn, yet another bow. So Blizzard didn't realize that they made 2 unique bows, no one wants to use them. Let's make a third one. And this one is actually pretty good, to be honest. So this one is for penetrating shot. Again, the build that needed the most help on Rogue in my opinion. And it gives you an up to 80% chance to fire an arrow that bounces off walls and scenery. And it makes enemies vulnerable if you hit them from behind. So I can show this in action. A viewer of mine actually got this. So it looks like this. You shoot into the wall and it just like starts jumping around. And you can see this here as well. Like it just comes back and bounces off. I think this is a really cool effect. And the thing is, the stats on this thing, like here, there's a screenshot, are actually incredibly good as well. So you see here it has vulnerable damage. It has a massive chunk damage to elites. It has up to 15% crit chance. Like this is a powerhouse of a bow. And for penetrating shot, I think this is going to be absolutely best in slot. But yeah, little caveat, I need to try this myself. I have not found this bow. But this looks very powerful for sure. And lastly, here's the Sorcerer unique with the Oculus. I have wand that gives you a teleport enchantment for free. And when you evade, you get teleported to a random nearby location. So that sounds omega scuffed, I gotta say. The stats on this thing are also awful, besides lots of ranks to teleport, so you can like use your random teleport more often. I guess it's gonna be like a very erratic playstyle. It could be pretty good in PvP, I imagine, but that's probably about it. I'm not really sure. Maybe there's gonna be like some kind of like uber pinnacle bosses where you have to dodge all the time or so. For now, this seems more like a meme item to me, and I also heard from people that they were bugging out and actually teleporting outside of the terrain and stuff like that. So yeah, maybe some tweaking needed here. Then we have the new legendary aspects. They've previewed a few of them already, but let's just go through all of them, starting with Audacity. So I think this is a very powerful aspect. It automatically stuns enemies around you once every 20 seconds if there's at least 5 enemies. I think this is incredibly good. You can combine this with Retribution aspect, which got freshly nerfed unfortunately, but you can also, for example, proc charged balls with this, or you can proc there's like some barb passives that give you extra damage against stunned enemies and these kind of things. So generally I think this is really superb, and it will also proc in usually the right moments because it needs at least 5 targets close to you. Especially if you're a ranged build or like a semi-ranged build, you can actually have some kind of control over this when it procs by just like, you know, teleporting into the pack or something like that, and then you stun everything for 4 seconds. I mean, that's a long time. If you combine this with something like smiting, you can actually have like straight up 5 seconds, like perma-stun elites until they become unstoppable. Then we have Craven, a mobility aspect. This gives you up to 40% movement speed when moving away from slowed or chilled enemies. Personally, I'm not a fan of this. I don't know, maybe something like Blizzard Sorg or so here and there. There will be like some surviving monsters and you get some extra speed. But really, I think this is a PvP aspect. Then we have Barbarian, Ancestral Charge. So we've also already seen this. It gives you 4 ancients that also charge, dealing 100% of normal damage. You can double this to 200 on a two-handed weapon. And then there's another aspect where you can like stack up to, I think, 600% extra damage for your next charge. And if those two things synergize, and you can actually hit the same target with multiple of those overlapping charges, I think this could actually be something. So I'm quite excited to see this one in action at least. So this might actually be really legit. Then we have Druid, Subterranean. This is a buff to Poison Creeper and Landslide combo. So yeah, Trample Slide is not really the craziest build right now, so it's nice that this gets a buff. And it also buffs Poison Creeper. So you can use that to like proc landslides around you now, and you also just generally deal more damage to poison enemies with earth skills now. So this is like kind of like an auto include because of that reason anyway, as long as you can provide poison somehow. Then we have Necromancers with Gore Quills. It makes Bloodlands consume blood orbs to also conjure lances on them. And the good thing about those lances is that they prioritize unlanced enemies, so that you spread the lances more and then you hit more targets with that, etc. So this is like another reason why I think Bloodlands build is actually going to be pretty good on the Necro, so I'm really excited to try this out. This seems really cool to me, and playing a Necro in the beta at least, I was a big fan of Bloodlands, so let's see. Then we have Rogue. This is a really good aspect, I believe. I've not found it yet. I've tried to find a little bit for it, but I haven't gotten it. This gives you a poison imbue for your puncture. So every third attack you get a poison imbue with up to 150% of normal potency for this. And this could actually be legitimately a really strong single target option, or at the very least like a good enough single target solution for builds that don't have a lot of single target, like Flurry, like Penetrating Shot. These builds are generally kind of like struggling against bosses, and they generally want to include a lot of investment into poison already, into poison imbue. So all this investment actually pays off twice, both by buffing your core skill and by buffing your basic skill. And puncture is generally like the #1 basic skill of choice on the rogue anyway, so this is exactly the right skill to work with. It's actually kind of strange that they didn't nerf puncture in this patch, I gotta say, and instead they added this, but maybe it does recognize that puncture is just really fun, honestly. It's just a really cool skill to use. And here we are. I'm really excited to see this in action, and I think this can definitely open up some really cool combos and really cool synergies. And lastly, we have the Sorcerer here with Searing Wards, an offensive aspect that gives you a free firewall after spending 100 mana, and those firewalls will also destroy incoming small missiles. Now, I think this is an incredibly powerful effect depending on how this works and what small missiles are exactly, but I guess it includes any kind of arrows, any kind of like little projectiles and stuff like that from enemies. Not sure if this would also delete, let's say, crossbow shots, maybe. That doesn't seem like a small missile, but we'll see, I guess. It definitely seems very exciting. And this also sums up the patch notes here. This is already an omega long video, so I'm not going to go into the hearts in detail now. I'm going to do this in a separate video tomorrow when I wake up. But yeah, I think some of them at least are definitely really exciting. Some others we'll see, so that depends a bit on how the mechanics work and stuff like that. But there are definitely some highlights here that I think will at least bring back most, if not more than this loss that we had in offensive capabilities in this patch now. So basically everyone does less damage now, especially the crit builds, especially like the high vulnerable uptime kind of builds. Dot builds generally are in a good spot, I guess, because they didn't really lose all that much. Minions comparatively gained a little bit because everything else lost more. And well, some other new build options are available here with some of those new legendary aspects, so that's kind of cool. What I'm most unhappy with this patch is that they failed to fix a lot of the busted builds. So for example, Bursting Venom's aspect was not fixed, it seems. It still procs too much and it still does way too much damage. Then we have stuff like the Bulwark build that is not fixed. I'm not really sure why this wasn't done. Again, maybe there might be a hotfix later down the line where they address that. But I'm not really such a fan of Blizzard keeping these kind of like bugged OP builds in the game. I think it's fine to nerf stuff if it's like too overpowered. But I think it's not fine to keep builds that like just straight up two-shot Uber Lilith or something like that in the game right now. So not sure why this wasn't addressed. I do have to say though that personally I am generally much more in favor of nerfing instead of buffing. I know a lot of people disagree with this, and I guess it's just different perspectives and different like things that I want from the game maybe. Personally, I like trying to figure out something cool, new and exciting that I can play now, and I do have many ideas that I already mentioned earlier that, yeah, I'll definitely try to make a reality and see how it goes. So far this has been working really great with all the builds I was making, and we'll see from here. I think some of those nerfs were absolutely warranted and necessary. For example, like this vulnerable change for crossbows and these kind of things. This definitely opens up more choices now on the rogues. This opens up more choices on barbarians, where maybe instead of swords you can actually use other weapons now as well and stuff like that. And I'm generally also not really opposed to especially making high-end content more high-end, because, well, I think that, you know, stuff like Uber Lilith and stuff like T100 Nightmare Dungeons is not necessarily something that everyone needs to strive for to actually complete. You know, it's fine if maybe they add some more like mid-game like challenges, for example. But one thing I really don't like about this patch is how I feel that the class balance has actually not improved. In fact, I think class balance has become worse now. So I think previously there was definitely much more of a reason to play any of the classes, and now, okay, they brought up some of the really weak Necromancer stuff a little bit. They nerfed the Bone Spear a little bit, so I think Necromancer is going to be kind of alright. It's going to be like middle of the pack to get off the barbs. And then you have, yeah, Rogues just looking overall pretty powerful. Druids probably being the most powerful overall despite the Grizzly Rage nerf. And then you have Sorcerers at the far bottom tier. I think Sorcerers are going to be really bad in this upcoming season unless there's like some last minute change or something like that. And that kind of bothers me, because I feel like that a lot of the nerfs and buffs that Blizzard is doing are generally addressing the right problems and generally bring the right solutions. But in the case of Sorcerer in particular, Sorcerer is already kind of the weakest class, and now they lost like two of their absolutely like most important damage multipliers, and there was basically no compensation for that. So this is definitely a very questionable choice there. Maybe they could have waited like another season to actually include some other buffs to other stuff, or bring, you know, some tweaks to legendary aspects or something, just to like increase the variety of the Sorc playstyles a bit, and not just go Devouring Blaze and Flame Shield and Aspect of Control everywhere, so that, yeah, it might be a bit more interesting. Also, I feel like that a lot of the buffs that we have seen for some of the underused skills or underused legendary powers are still very modest. So I think there could definitely be like some bigger swings in some cases. I kind of see that, you know, they don't want to overshoot and then nerf something again later down the line too much. That always feels bad, and instead you can just buff it again later if no one uses it. I can see that, but at least for like this big Season 1 update, maybe we could have expected a bit more there. One thing I don't quite understand though are these experience changes though. I mean, okay, I'm on board with killing boosting. I think boosting doesn't need to exist. But when it comes to this here, where you are strongly disincentivized to fight higher level monsters now, to the point where you will just completely ignore higher level monsters and just go for monsters of your own level all the time, I think this is a bit weird. So, okay, they brought down the player power a little bit, and now it's not so easy to go high level monsters anymore. But I think having this kind of like a little challenge at least of going for +3 levels, I think that was kind of nice, honestly. And now you have no reason to go higher levels really, and like to fight high level monsters. It's just kind of completely dead. And so is outdoor farming as well. So that's actually a change that I kind of glanced over earlier, where monster levels in outdoor zones are starting to fall behind your character's level much earlier. So previously this only happened after level 95, so monsters were just capped at 95. But now you have this minimum level of 55 in Nightmare, and you have the minimum level of 75 in Torment. And past that, monsters will start falling behind your character's level. And if you fight lower level monsters, you'll get way less XP. For -5 levels, you get half the XP. So it's absolutely not worth to farm anything in outdoor content. This means that, for example, for the season start, you definitely want to make sure that you do all of the renown as early as possible, basically starting from level 1. In fact, they buff renown a little bit. You get a bit more now from both side quests and dungeons, so that's kind of neat. And you want to make sure that you finish this stuff as quickly as possible, all the way to renown 5 in all of the regions, so that then you can kind of like ignore outdoor content as much as possible, besides maybe a bit of Helltide, and then just blast Nightmare Dungeons if you want to be kind of efficient. One neat little thing though is they buffed World Tier 2, which now also gives you 15% more items. I think this is actually really superb change. I think World Tier 2 should be more incentivized in any way, and now this has happened. That was kind of good, and you can still play World Tier 1 if you feel uncomfortable with the difficulty, if you're really weak. And lastly, here's a nerf to Helltide. So you need 250 sinners now instead of 175 to open the Mysteries chest. So this is usually the one chest that everyone was farming in Helltide. And I guess this incentivizes you a bit more to open these other chests as well. Or maybe even only those other chests, we'll see. I heard from people that were farming Helltide post-patch that you got like wave your cinders, but that was actually a bug. So there's like a tweet from Adam Fletcher that confirms that this is not intended, and you're still supposed to get the regular amount of cinders, or even more actually because of this here, so you get like slightly more cinders. And Helltide monsters are also slightly high level now. Now, I did hear from some people that they were actually able to get Forgotten Souls from just salvaging Legendaries now, so maybe there's like a hidden stealth change or something. Well, and you don't actually have to farm Helltide very much anyway, if you just salvage enough items, but I have not confirmed this myself. In any case, oof, this was it for my patch notes analysis for now. This was actually quite a long one. Quite a lot of stuff, quite a lot of nerfs. Generally, I kind of see the direction that the developers are going in and why, and I do agree with a lot of things that kind of needed adjustments. I think that most of the nerfs were okay, but some of the buffs were just not enough, and a lot of things that could have been buffed were not buffed at all, or not buffed enough at least. So this is kind of like a sad story here. What does it mean for Season 1? Yeah, Sorg's kind of down in the gutter, the other classes kind of fine, I guess. We'll see what kind of like crazy new builds we can cook up with those Malignant hearts. So that's actually what I'm excited for. I think experimenting with those Malignant hearts is going to be very cool, and I'm really looking forward to that. Again, I'm going to go into this in more detail another time, but there are definitely some new build options available here that we didn't really have before. For now, I'm just going to go into the season with like an open mind. I'm going to race to 100, and then we're going to see what next. And let's see if we can still do all the same challenges like Uber Lilith and Nightmare Dungeon pushing or whatever. I guess it will be just fine. And that's it for my impressions of this patch here. Let me know what you think. Maybe there are some changes you really liked. Maybe there's something you really dislike. I see that most people are generally more on the dislike side, and I also understand why. Maybe you can hope for some more tweaks down the line. So it seems like Blizzard is trying to do a bit of like damage control because a lot of people are upset. And in fact, they have announced that they're going to do a campfire chat surprise later this week on Friday. So this is going to be like right one day after season launch. And let's see what I have to say there. I hope you enjoyed this video, and see you guys next time.